The weak scream. The strong stay silent. Reaction is instinct. Restraint is power. In a world addicted to noise, the man who stays silent owns the room. He doesn't need to raise his voice because his presence says enough. Want to win more battles? Learn to stay silent. Let calm be your weapon. Let discipline be your edge. Subscribe to keep your inner world strong, because that's where true victory begins. 1. The weak scream. The strong stay silent. Pause for a second. Think about the last time you got angry. Maybe you raised your voice, slammed a door, or said something you regretted. And in that moment, sure, it felt like you won. But deep down, you knew you weren't in control. Someone else pulled the strings. Someone else dictated your mood. And you reacted exactly how they wanted you to. That's when you need to remember this. The weak scream. The strong stay silent. Silence, in this case, is not weakness. It's a declaration of power. A truly strong man has nothing to prove to the world. He doesn't need to shout to assert himself. Because he knows this simple truth: mastery over one's emotions is the highest form of strength. Marcus Aurelius, warrior, emperor, philosopher, once wrote, "If you are provoked, don't be pulled in. Be the sculptor of your own soul." You can drive the fastest car, lift the heaviest weights, stack 6 figures, but if you can't control your reactions, you're still a prisoner. And real men are never prisoners to emotion. Every time you react impulsively, you hand over your power. But when you stay silent, when you stay grounded, you win. Every single time. Strategic silence isn't weakness. It's a weapon. It keeps them guessing. It protects your focus. It puts you in control of the tempo, while others waste energy yelling into the void. Because in that silence, you hear something most men miss. The voice of reason, the voice of discipline, the voice of your higher self. The weak scream because they can't handle the storm inside. The strong stay silent because they are the storm. Real men aren't drawn into noise. They create stillness. Stillness to think. Stillness to choose. Stillness to strike, with precision and purpose. And if you've made it this far, it means you're done being the pawn. You're ready to be the one calling the shots. The one who doesn't flinch. Doesn't chase approval. Doesn't fall for bait. So starting today, when someone tries to provoke you, stay silent. Lock eyes. And smile. Because you know, the strong don't need to shout. They just need to stand tall. Hit that subscribe button to never miss a lesson in becoming a grounded, unshakable, powerful man, built from the inside out. 2. Emotional reaction is the fastest way to lose control. And so, if you understood the power of silence, if you've begun to feel that shift inside you, where stillness starts replacing the need to respond, then it's time for the next truth to settle in. Emotional reaction is the fastest way to lose control. You see, silence is only the first layer. Control, true control, comes from mastering what happens inside before the silence even happens. It's not just about what you don't say. It's about what you don't let inside. Because every time you react emotionally, you hand someone else the keys to your inner world. You let them steer. And whether they deserve it or not, you let them drive you away from your center, away from your purpose. You become their puppet. And the worst part? You don't even realize it until it's too late. Until you've already said it. Done it. Burned it. Let that sink in. Every time you let anger speak for you, you give away your strength. Every time you lash out, you shrink yourself down to their level. You let their chaos dictate your clarity. And here's the dangerous truth: most men live their entire lives stuck in this loop. Trigger, emotion, reaction, regret. Over and over again. But a man who has trained himself to pause, to feel the fire and not let it spread, that man becomes untouchable. That's where Stoicism hits like a blade of clarity. As Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Your power is not in the punch, not in the comeback. It's in the pause. The pause where you say nothing, not because you're weak, but because you're calculating, centering, choosing. Because not every reaction deserves your energy, and not every conflict deserves your presence. The man who controls his emotions controls his life. And in a world filled with loud, reactive, ego-driven noise, that kind of calm is magnetic. It draws respect. It commands a room without raising a voice. Think about it. Who do you trust more, the man who explodes at every comment, or the one who listens with calm, responds with purpose, and never lets his pride speak louder than his principles? That's who you're becoming. Or rather, that's who you remember you were always meant to be. Not some hot-headed reactor to every slight, but a leader of your own life. So the next time someone tries to bait you, online, in traffic, at work, in your own home, don't take it. Don't give them your energy. Give them silence. Give them calm. And give yourself the power of control. Because the world doesn't need another man who can throw a punch. It needs more men who can withhold one. That's real power. That's real discipline. And the world will follow a man who can stand still while everyone else burns. 3. Choose calm, not because they deserve peace, but because you do. If silence is strength, if control is power, then calm is your armor. It's one thing to stay silent. It's another to resist the pull of a volatile world and walk through it like a man who's made of something different. Something unshakable. And maybe now you've started to taste it, that ability to not react, to not take the bait, to feel emotion rise, and let it fall without acting on it. That's not weakness. That's evolution. Because calm doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you've learned when not to feed the fire. And here's the truth most people never admit. Not everyone deserves your calm. Not everyone earns your forgiveness, your grace, your steady energy. But you deserve it. Because when you give in to chaos, when you respond with fire, when you raise your voice, when you go to war over every slight, you don't just burn bridges. You burn yourself. You set your peace on fire, just to win an argument that doesn't even matter the next morning. So the question isn't, do they deserve my calm? The real question is, do I deserve peace? And the answer is yes. You do. But peace isn't given. It's chosen, moment by moment, breath by breath, decision by decision. Stoic philosophy has been teaching this for centuries. That the real fight is not with the world, it's with yourself. The battle between your lower impulses and your higher self. And when you choose calm, you win. But calm is not passive. Calm is the ultimate flex. It's knowing you could destroy someone with words, with rage, with presence, and choosing instead to let them wrestle with the silence of your self-mastery. You don't rise to their level. You stay above it. You don't engage with their chaos. You move through it like stone in a river. And when people see that, when they see a man who doesn't flinch, doesn't fight every battle, doesn't crave attention or reaction, they remember him. Because he's rare. Because he's real. Because he's what every man wants to be but few are willing to become. It's not about being liked. It's about being centered. Grounded. Clear. And the reward for that clarity? You get to walk away. With peace. With dignity. With focus. You don't lose energy chasing what doesn't matter. You conserve it. You channel it. You build with it. So, when they test you, and they will, when they raise their voice, twist your words, try to provoke a war, don't fight for them. Fight for your peace. Walk away not as a coward, but as a king who refuses to kneel to petty noise. Because you deserve that calm. Not because the world handed it to you, but because you've earned it, over and over again, with every moment you chose mastery over mayhem. And if you're becoming that man, Not just wishing, but working toward it. Then keep walking. Keep building. Keep choosing calm. Not for them. For you. 4. Reaction is instinct. Reflection is intelligence. If you've walked the road this far, from silence to control to calm, then the next step is inevitable. Because this path doesn't stop at stillness. It leads you to clarity. It trains you to pause, not just to withhold, but to understand. To reflect. And that is where true transformation begins. You see, any man can react. In fact, reacting is the easiest thing in the world. You feel something, and boom, you say it, do it, post it, fight it. That's instinct. That's survival-level programming. It takes zero strength to snap. Zero thought to explode. But to reflect? To actually pause, take that fire inside you, and ask, is this worth my energy? What outcome do I truly want here? That's no longer a reaction. That's a decision. And that's what separates the average from the extraordinary. Because here's the raw truth. Instinct may help you survive. But reflection, that helps you lead. It helps you grow. It helps you rise. Epictetus once said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. But I'll take it further. It's not even how you react. It's whether you take the time to reflect before you do. You want to know why so many men feel lost? Powerless? Always chasing peace but never finding it? It's because they're living on autopilot. Their entire lives are built on reaction. To stress. To pressure. To people. To pain. No pause. No breath. No thought. Just motion. Noise. Emotion. And in that storm, they can't hear the only voice that actually matters. The one inside. The one with answers. The one that speaks after the chaos fades. Reflection creates that space. That clarity. It's not weakness. It's a weapon. Because a man who reflects before he moves is a man who cannot be manipulated. He's not just acting, he's choosing. Think about it. The strongest men you've ever seen, they don't flinch. They don't panic. Because their minds are calm. And their minds are calm because they've trained themselves to stop, observe, understand, and then act. Not the other way around. So ask yourself, in your next conversation, next conflict, next test, will you be the man who reacts like everyone else? Or will you be the man who pauses, who processes, and who leads with wisdom? Because your power is in the pause. Your strength is in the stillness. And your greatness, it lives in the space between stimulus and response. So, don't be just another man pulled around by instincts and ego. Be the one who builds a fortress of reflection around his mind. Who makes every response a conscious choice, not a reflex. That's the man who commands respect. That's the man who shapes the room. The moment. The outcome. Not through force, but through focus. And if that's the direction you're heading, stay on the path. Every time you pause, reflect, and rise above the noise, you're not falling behind. You're pulling ahead. Because reaction is instinct. But reflection? That's where power lives. That's where men are forged. 5. No one can hurt you unless you allow them to. By now, you've learned how to pause. You've discovered that between the trigger and the reaction lies a moment where your true self gets to choose. And in that moment, you reclaim your power. But the question is, what happens when the storm doesn't come from outside, but inside? What happens when the pain gets in? That's where this truth must hit you, not just as a quote, but as a code. No one can hurt you unless you allow them to. And I don't say that to diminish real pain. I say it to remind you of something deeper. You are the gatekeeper of your own mind. You decide what gets in. You decide what gets to stay. You decide who holds power over your peace. The man who hasn't realized this is constantly bleeding from wounds he didn't create, but refuses to close. He blames the world. He blames the woman. He blames the boss, the friend, the father who wasn't there. But deep down, what he hasn't accepted is this: it was never about what they did. It's always about what he continues to carry. You are not a sponge. You do not exist to absorb the projections, criticisms, or poison of others. You are a fortress, and it's time you started acting like it. Seneca, one of the great Stoics, wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." How many times have you been hurt not by the words someone said, but by the meaning you gave them? Not by the action itself, but by how you replayed it, relived it, reinterpreted it 1,000 times in your own head. That is the battlefield. Not out there, but in here. Because pain doesn't stay unless you feed it. Resentment doesn't survive unless you water it. And emotional wounds don't grow unless you leave them open. So what do the strongest men do? They take ownership. They don't suppress pain, they examine it. They don't deny impact, they decide the meaning. And then they choose, consciously, relentlessly, to let go. Let go, not because the other person deserves it. Let go, because you do. Let go, because you refuse to be a prisoner of someone else's moment of weakness. This is not about apathy. It's not about being numb or pretending nothing hurts. It's about reclaiming authority over your inner world. It's about saying, "You can insult me, but I decide what that means. You can betray me, but I decide what I carry from it. You can wound me, but I choose how deep it cuts, or if it cuts at all." That's what separates a reactionary man from a grounded one. That's what separates the wounded from the unbreakable. Not the absence of pain, but the refusal to be ruled by it. So today, ask yourself honestly, where am I still giving people power over me? What story am I repeating that keeps the pain alive? And more importantly, what happens when I stop? Because once you realize that no one can truly hurt you without your permission, you don't just gain control. You gain freedom. And freedom, that's the most dangerous, most magnetic, most manly thing a person can ever possess. Carry that with you. 6. Hasty reactions lead to lasting regret. Once you begin to realize that no one can hurt you unless you allow them to, something inside you shifts. You stop blaming. You stop absorbing. You start owning. But here's what comes next, the test that every man must face over and over again. What do you do when the moment is burning? When your blood is hot, your pride is screaming, and everything in you says, react now. Because that's the crossroads. That's the true fight. And most men lose it. They react fast, loud, impulsively. They say what they shouldn't. They do what they can't undo. And they end up sitting alone later, staring at the ashes of something they didn't mean to destroy. All because of 10 seconds of emotion. And this is the hard truth that no one warns you about. The fastest reactions often leave the deepest regrets. You lash out in anger and lose her trust forever. You hit send on that message, and the damage is permanent. You shout back in a meeting, and your reputation cracks. Why? Because in that moment, you thought you were being real, defending yourself, not letting them win. But what you really did was lose control. You gave in to ego. You surrendered reason. You burned a future for the satisfaction of a second. And here's the even harder truth. Once it's said, you can't unsay it. Once it's done, you can't rewind it. And no amount of apologies can rebuild the trust that your reaction shattered. That's why the wisest men, the most disciplined, the most powerful, move slowly when it matters most. They don't rush to speak. They don't act on impulse. They understand what the rest of the world has forgotten. There is strength in the pause. Seneca wrote, "Anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it." And he was right. Because when you allow the moment to pull you, instead of pausing to pull yourself together, you're no longer a man, you're a puppet. So what does a strong man do instead? He breathes. He waits. He lets the emotion rise and fall. And only then does he act, if he still needs to. Because clarity always comes after stillness. Wisdom always follows restraint. And the man who has the discipline to wait 10 seconds often avoids 10 years of regret. You want to live a life of peace? Of pride? Of power? Then master your timing. Don't let temporary feelings write permanent consequences. Don't let someone else's chaos create your legacy. Don't let the moment cost you everything you've spent years building. The real warrior doesn't strike first. He waits. He observes. And then, only when it's necessary, only when it's precise, he moves. Not out of emotion, but out of intention. That's not weakness. That's mastery. That's what separates boys from men and men from leaders. So next time the heat rises, choose pause. Choose patience. Choose peace. Because regret is heavy. But the strength to wait? That stays with you forever. 7. The instigator wants you to lose your temper. Don't give them that privilege. After learning to pause, after tasting the strength that comes from restraint, from not letting one heated moment define you, something else becomes clear. There are people in this world who want you to lose control. They provoke. They poke. They prod. Not because they're strong, but because they're weak. And in their weakness, they try to drag you into the chaos where they feel most comfortable. Because here's the ugly truth. Some people don't fight to win. They fight to bait. They fight to pull you down. To disrupt your focus. To bruise your pride. To stain your discipline. And the moment you take the bait, the moment your voice rises, your jaw tightens, your energy spirals, they've won. Not because they were right. Not because they were better. But because they pulled you out of your power and into theirs. That's the game. And most men fall for it. You know the feeling. Someone comes at you sideways, a rude comment, a passive-aggressive dig, a blatant insult. Your instinct? Fire back. Assert yourself. Prove a point. But that instinct is exactly what they're counting on. Why? Because a man who loses his temper loses control. And a man without control is easy to defeat, easy to manipulate, to discredit, to drag down. And so the challenge becomes this. How do you stay calm in the face of someone who wants you rattled? Answer, you remember this one truth. Your composure is your dominance. Not the louder voice. Not the faster clapback. But the calm presence of someone who cannot be moved. Because when you don't give them what they're looking for, when you hold your line, when you stare at them with unshaken stillness, that silence becomes louder than any roar. That calm becomes terrifying, unreadable, unshakable. And suddenly, they don't know what to do. Because they were ready for the argument. They were ready for the reaction. But they weren't ready for a man who's already mastered himself. That's not passivity. That's strategy. You're not running. You're choosing not to be led into someone else's storm. Because let's be honest. A lion doesn't answer to barking dogs. A soldier doesn't draw his sword over every insult. And a king doesn't argue in the streets. You don't have to respond. You don't have to react. You don't have to prove anything, not to someone beneath your level, and especially not in the heat of provocation. That's the difference between men who are ruled by emotion and men who rule themselves. So the next time someone tries to light a fire inside you, don't ignite. Breathe. Watch. Stay still. Because when you stay calm while someone else is trying to control you, that is domination without force. That is power without volume. That is victory without raising a hand. And that, right there, is the kind of strength that no one can take away. 8. Not reacting is still a reaction, it's the higher one. After mastering the art of not giving the instigator what he craves, after learning to sit in your power, unshaken, while chaos tries to circle you, you arrive at a deeper realization. Silence is not absence. It's presence, sharpened, focused, uncompromising. Because here's the paradox that most men miss. Not reacting doesn't mean you're doing nothing. It means you're choosing a different kind of power. In fact, not reacting is still a reaction. It's just not the kind they expected. It's not loud. It's not flashy. It doesn't seek validation. It simply is calm, deliberate, sovereign. And here's the magic. That stillness, that silence, speaks louder than any burst of emotion ever could. Because when you don't react, you force the world to rethink you. You create space. You create mystery. You create gravity. You become the kind of man who can't be read, can't be baited, can't be played. And in that refusal to respond, you flip the script. Now they're scrambling. Now they're the ones overthinking. Now they're wondering, did I miss something? Why isn't he engaging? Why isn't he fighting back? Because you've chosen a response that operates on a level they're not prepared for. A level where emotion doesn't rule and ego doesn't need to be fed. The world is full of men who respond to everything. You see it every day. Online debates. Angry tweets. Road rage. Heated confrontations. Men trying to assert dominance by raising their voice, puffing their chest, throwing verbal punches. But that's not strength. That's scarcity. It's insecurity dressed up as masculinity. Real power? Real power is quiet. Real power listens more than it speaks. Real power is choosing not to attend every argument you're invited to. Because not every battle is worth your time. Not every critic deserves a rebuttal. And not every moment requires your presence. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is walk away without a single word. Not out of fear, but out of understanding. You're not here to prove anything. You're here to protect something, your peace, your purpose, your position. And every time you don't react, every time you don't explain, every time you don't defend, you're saying, without saying, I've already won. Because this is the move of a man who's in control. Not just of his words, but of his identity. He knows who he is. He knows what matters. And he refuses to give his power away, even if provoked. So next time someone tries to pull you in, to twist your buttons, to ignite your fire, let your non-response be your message. Let your silence be your shield. Let your calm be your comeback. Not reacting isn't weakness. It's strategy. It's clarity. It's the higher road, and the one most men will never have the courage to take. But you will. 9. Not reacting doesn't mean not acting, it means acting with precision. By now, you've learned to hold the line. You've felt the discipline it takes to say nothing when the world dares you to lash out. You've tasted the quiet power that comes from not letting the noise outside dictate your peace inside. But here's what you must understand next. Stillness is not passivity. Silence is not surrender. And calm is not inaction. Because far too often, when a man steps back, the world assumes he's stepping down. But the truth is, a disciplined man doesn't act less because he's afraid. He acts less often because when he does move, he moves with precision. You see, not reacting is the doorway to higher action. Purposeful action. Strategic action. Unemotional, but not uncaring. Measured, but not timid. Calm, but never complacent. That's the line most men never learn to walk. They either explode too fast or shut down completely. But the man who rises, the man who leads, is the one who knows how to wait. And then strike with intention. He's not trying to win every argument. He's not playing to look powerful. He's not reacting to every opinion. He's watching, calculating, refining his next move, not with ego, but with clarity. Because when you don't waste energy on reaction, you have more energy for action that matters. That's what the Stoics taught. Marcus Aurelius didn't preach detachment to escape life. He taught detachment so you could engage better. So your hand wouldn't be forced. So your decisions wouldn't be polluted by panic, anger, or insecurity. Seneca said it best, a wise man is never busy. He is never rushed. Because he acts only when action is required, and when it is, he moves without hesitation. That is the essence of manhood and mastery. Not the man who never moves, but the man who never moves without purpose. And here's the deeper layer. When you train yourself to act only when needed, you start seeing what others miss. You stop chasing. You start building. You stop defending. You start directing. Because now, you're not just reacting to life. You're shaping it. So don't confuse your silence for weakness. And don't let others mistake your stillness for fear. Let them wonder. Let them guess. You're not there to explain. You're there to execute. And when you do, when you choose to move, to speak, to act, it lands differently. It cuts cleaner. It commands more. Because it's not driven by noise. It's driven by necessity. So the next time you're tempted to explain yourself, defend your pride, prove your strength, ask, is this the right moment? Is this the right move? And will this serve what truly matters to me? Because that's where greatness lives. Not in constant reaction, but in rare, focused, relentless action. Not reacting doesn't mean not acting. It means you're saving your strength for the moment that matters. And when that moment comes, you don't miss. 10. Your greatest enemy isn't the one who insults you, it's the mind you haven't mastered. By now, you've come full circle. You've chosen silence over shouting. You've chosen control over chaos. You've chosen calm, not because the world deserved it, but because you did. You've learned to pause, to wait, to hold your fire until it truly matters. And more than anything, you've stopped handing over your power to people who never earned it. But there's one final truth. One final battle. And it doesn't come from someone else. It comes from you. Because in the end, the person most capable of destroying your peace, of shaking your discipline, of derailing your purpose, is the version of you that you still haven't mastered. Your greatest enemy isn't the one who insults you. It's the mind that still believes the insult. It's the voice inside that says, you need to defend yourself. Don't let them get away with that. Prove them wrong. Prove them right. Prove something, anything. That's the real fight. Not against their words, but against your need to respond to them. Not against their chaos, but against your impulse to match it. Not against their weakness, but against your need to react out of yours. And here's what most men never learn. You can beat every opponent, win every argument, dominate every room, and still be a slave to your own untrained mind. Because it's not about how many battles you win out there. It's about whether you've won the battle in here, the one between the man you are and the man you could be, if you stop letting your emotions make your choices. Think about it. You've trained your body. You've built your reputation. You fought for your position. But have you trained your mind with the same level of discipline, repetition, and intensity? Because the mind left untrained will chase every insult, replay every failure, overthink every step, and sabotage even your best moments. It'll whisper doubt in your wins. It'll amplify voices that never mattered. And worst of all, it'll pretend to be you. But that voice isn't you. It's the echo of untrained thoughts. It's the shadow of emotion without direction. And that's why this moment matters. Because now, you know better. You don't need to react. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to fight every battle. You need to master yourself. And when you do, when you finally shift your focus from dominating the outside world to conquering your own mind, something profound happens. You stop being reactive. You start being intentional. You stop being ruled by emotion. You start leading from clarity. You become the man who no longer needs applause, agreement, or permission. You become grounded, unshakable, a storm within still waters. So remember this. Your real opponent isn't the critic, the insult, the challenge. It's the undisciplined mind that still reacts to all three. Master that. And nothing can move you. Conclusion: silence, mastery, action, the art of the modern man. You've walked through every layer of the path. From reacting on impulse to mastering your silence. From letting emotions lead you to choosing when, how, and if to respond. From chaos to clarity. From noise to stillness. From being pulled by the world to standing unshaken inside it. And now, the truth is clear. Silence is not weakness. Restraint is not fear. Stillness is not surrender. And your greatest enemy was never out there. It was the undisciplined mind inside you. This is not the journey of a fragile ego. It's the quiet, steady rise of a man reclaiming ownership of his own mind, and in doing so, taking command of his entire life. In a world addicted to noise, outrage, and constant reaction, you don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to fight to prove yourself. You just need to know when to stay silent, when to speak, and when to strike with precision. That is real power. Not theatrical. Not performative. But unshakable.